I just invite you to keep your eyes open. Just drop your gaze so that there's a bowl, if you like, that you can see mostly, and everything else is in your periphery. And your eyes are still open. And we're going to take at your own pace, which could be different to mine, 6 deep breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And just take a couple of breaths at your normal pace. And what you'll find as you drop in is your breath will naturally slow and deepen. So it's in through the nose. And out through the mouth. And we're just making those breaths slightly more robust and full than our normal breath would be. And it may help for you to put your hand on your chest so that you can draw your attention to the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. And if you've done your 6, do a few more, focusing on lengthening and smoothening, my word, the inhalation, and lengthening and smoothing the exhalation. And it's okay, even a good thing, to allow a little bit of sound to come from your chest as you exhale. And as you're sitting with your breath, being your focus, there may be thoughts, noises, uncomfortabilities, for example, that distracts you away from your breath. Just allow those to drift off. Come back to your breath, in through the nose and out through the mouth. And we're going to do a 5 sensory awareness. So as we focus on our breath and just allow that to settle into a relaxed rhythm, we're going to bring our attention to another of these senses. So the first one we're going to do is touch. And so continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth, I invite you to find something to touch and even rub your hands along. I've actually got some linen pants on, so I'm kind of rubbing around my knees, feeling the roughness of the linen. It may be, your shirt, your hair, even the seat you're sitting on, if you've got a nice leather or velvet or cushion, is just allowing yourself to breathe as you feel. And I'm also sitting on a sheepskin rug, so I'm just moving my hands, and there's a table in front of me, and allowing my senses to feel the different textures of the things around me. And if you've got no shoes on, I'm about to kick mine off, because I've got a rough sisal mat underneath me. We can do the same thing with your feet. It's just grounding into what can I sense by way of feeling, touching, around me. And still breathing in through the nose, long, filling breaths, and out through the mouth. And just be aware if your jaw is, I'm noticing some of you have quite clenched lips. Just feel into your jaw, and you can touch it yourself if you like, because generally when we have clenched lips, we also have quite a stiff jaw. So it may help to kind of open your mouth a little bit, get into your jaw on your cheeks, and give it a little wriggle around. That's it. And just remind yourself that there's nothing else you need to do right now except be present. So all of those things that you've carried up until sitting down at 4 o'clock today, just drop off and loosen your jaw. And so the next sense that we're going to focus on is taste. And you may think that there's nothing around to taste. I'm fortunate. I have some tea. So if you have a cup of tea here or water, take a couple of sips with your focus on what it is you're tasting. So even swirl around the tea or the water in your mouth. Take another sip. I can taste the coffee in my mouth that I had earlier still. And remembering to breathe, of course. Ah. Our third sense is going to be our smell. So if you've got something that you can smell, a tea, a candle. When I really focus on smell, I can actually smell dust in the air around me. Ah. Just heightening our awareness of these things that we take for granted, actually, as we roll on into our busy days. We're drinking our cup of tea without really even tasting it. Sometimes our food too. And so for the next one is sound. And for this one, I do invite you to close your eyes just so that you can concentrate on the sounds in the foreground, which is going to be my voice, and the sounds in the background. Uh, those little things that kind of happen without us sometimes even noticing. Little bit of traffic, sound of rain if it's raining where you are. For me, I've got my pool waterfall in the background. And I can hear a boat somewhere on the lake in front of me. And breathing in through the nose, long, smooth inhalations. And out through the mouth. And for our last of the five senses, if we consider that we only have five, and I propose that we have many, many more than that. For our last one is look around you to the things that bring you pleasure to look at. So even as I'm looking at the screen, I see Kath has a lovely calming painting behind her. I have trees around me. Arlene's got a beautiful little painting of a fairy. So have a look around your own space. It may be that you just had your nails done and that looking at your nails gives you pleasure. Hmm. Ah, and a couple of nice deep breaths again to bring us back into the room where we're all sitting and ready for what is some of my very favourite content, conscious communication. So hello to everyone that's joined us. And I know that there are some people who have registered for the recording as well to catch up later. So if you've joined us, you will be able to access the recording as well. And the people that registered will also be able to see this recording. So before I get started, I choose to acknowledge. Now, I think that's going to come out back to front to you, reading the title of the book, or is it okay? You read it? Yeah. Okay, so this book is actually a book that can be a little complex to get hold of. It was written by a man called Robert Tennyson Stevens, and in the last 12 months, Robert passed away. And his book is called Conscious Language, The Logos of Now, was one of the, let's say, handful of books that I've ever picked up that I really was, it was a light bulb going off in terms of helping to understand the way that we communicate and what we're actually communicating. And what I'm talking about here is the use of language. So speaking language consciously and also listening consciously to language. And this particular book was a book that for me was a linchpin. I went, that's it. That's our cue. Our language is the way that we can better understand ourselves and what our state of being is telling us if we pay attention. And it's also a really good way to listen to other people's, let's say, repeated use of language to tell us where they're at. And knowing where somebody's at in kind of the way that they present themselves and their state of being is as important, I think, as us just doing those kind of, communications back and forth that we quite often do. So I will share my screen now. Now, can you all see? Yeah. If anyone does, while we're at it, is interested in having a copy of this, please let me know, because I think I can still get hold of a few copies that can be read. Otherwise, my own, I'm, really quite precious about, because I know that they can be difficult to get hold of. So, with conscious communication, we're speaking about our talking and our words and our written, if you like, communication. We're also talking about our ability to listen. And what I'm going to do now is to expand on the traditional communication model. Is I'll say something as clearly and succinctly as I can and check that you understand it. That's a very structured way of understanding communication, because our words have an extraordinary amount of power. And there's a kind of way of thinking is that they call it spelling, is because our words are spelling or creating our reality. And to a degree, I actually agree with that. And to an even greater degree, I believe that our words are the first thing that we and others can capture to see what our state of mind is, and our belief system that might be surrounding the things that we understand to be true. Whether they are true, it can sometimes be questionable. So, from my perspective, if we talk about something coming from no existence into existence, it's a pathway. And what I mean by that is any invention or idea comes from a thought. That's its first signal of being. And that thought can come into your head along with the estimated 70,000 other thoughts that you have in the day and be lost, right? Can be lost. The minute we turn it something that's very intangible and belongs only to us because it's in our mind into a form of language, in other words, we express it, what we're actually doing is making it more tangible, more real, and it's on the path to what we experience being real, because our mindset, as expressed by our language, already tells us the direction that we're going in. So there's some very interesting experiments by a man called Emoto. He did quite a lot of work on water molecules. And so what he did was he took various samples of water, from polluted water to tap water to whatever, and he put them under a microscope. And for example, the polluted water looks really ugly under a microscope. He then put the various waters in jars and spoke to the jars. So let's say he had a jar of tap water on the left and a jar of tap water on the right. The one on the right, he would continuously say, I love you, you're flourishing, you're wonderful, whatever it was, give positive affirmations to. And the one on the left, he would speak in a negative way to. And when he re-photographed the molecules of water, the water on the positive bottle molecules had formed very crystalline, almost snowflake appearing, very structured, quite beautiful molecules. The one on the left, if it got uglier, basically. It had no structure. It was dark. So that's why I've set up here that our words, whether they encourage, heal, comfort, inspire, criticize, condemn, command, create, or inform, they affect adults, they affect children, they affect animals, and they even affect plants. And there's been quite a bit of research done to even doing a similar thing to what Emoto did with plants, is speaking to one plant nicely and the other plant in a mean way. And I think a number of schools have actually tested that theory. So our belief systems, our emotions and our thoughts are expressed through the words that we use, and they tell us what we've agreed upon as being true. So all of you will have heard, I've put a couple of examples in there that people will say life is easy, life is hard, fair, unfair. And just as a show of hands, has anyone ever come across someone who they would, and it could even be you, classify as being generally quite a negative person? I think we all know someone. Would you agree? Yeah. So when you look at that, that's their state of being. Okay, their thought processes are quite negative, and what comes out of their mouths is going to be the four things that we're going to talk about today. There's going to be a lot of words that will tell you, yes, they're negative, yes, they're imposing their own limitations on themselves and whatever through their belief systems. Mm. And obviously, some of the words we even use internally can be pretty mean to ourselves. So we're talking about those kinds of words too, and catching ourselves in our conscious communication in the words we speak. Also, the words that we say to ourselves about what it is that we're doing. So this is kind of, I guess, the stream of, and I'll call it manifestation, where our reality starts to get a snowball on how tangible things are. So our thoughts start off as being quite an intangible personal thing that belongs to us. The minute we put those into words, they're a little bit more tangible. The minute our words, when we hear them enough, become our actions habits, our habits become our character, and our character becomes our destiny. And again, if you think to that person who you'd classify as being quite negative, and you have a look at that and you say, okay, so what is it that their experience looks like right now? Because my guess is the more negative and the more we reinforce negative into our words and our thoughts and the way that we behave, is that we tend to have more negative experiences. Would you agree? Yeah, and that goes for all of us. So, for instance, if you wake up having maybe less sleep than you would have preferred, or, you wake up in the morning, you've got something on your mind that's perturbing your state of being. Sometimes when we have that first initial thought that could be negative, it almost becomes a roll-on of negative things. So we had that first initial thought, and then we spill the coffee, and then we have an argument with our partner, and then we're late for work, and then that negative kind of tends to expand. Yeah. So our words are often the first time that we catch them, because our thoughts, as I said, there's 70,000 of them a day. Some go through rockets with little conscious awareness. And the first time we hear ourselves saying something or hear someone else saying something is when we notice where we're at and where they're at. So let me introduce you to the word that I believe is the most used word in the English language. And that's not. And what I mean by all its variations and contractions is isn't, doesn't, wasn't, won't. Okay, so they are all contractions of will not, cannot, should not. Okay. So when you listen to people speak, and it amazed me when I did this, even for myself, because my use of the word not was very frequent, and it still sometimes is. When I wake up and I'm in an anxious, agitated state trying to get things done, I drop back into using lots of nots and I catch myself. So this is kind of, catching yourself and listening to it. There's no judgment about whether you use these words or not. It's simply to catch it and say, what does that mean to me in my state of being when every word that I'm using has a not contraction in it? Politicians are experts at knots. And the issue, or one of the issues with the using not, is that it can make what we think are simple sentences into double negative complexities where there is no way for us to even work out what's the answer. So, for instance, and I've put one there, don't you want to come? If we expand that out, is do not you want to come? Is my answer yes or no? Okay. The other thing is, one of the things that Robert Tennyson Stevens talks about is that our greatest command into our reality is the words I am. So when I describe myself and I use the words I am, whether it's a role, a teacher, or I am patient, they are very strong commands to the universe. And what many of us do is say, I'm not. And that's like saying, I am not. I remember a game at school, or a kind of a speech pattern it was in Queensland in a country school that I went to, is we'd say, oh, yeah, I really like him. Not. Did anyone else do that, or is that just a weird little? Okay. So that's what we're doing all the time when we say I'm not, or right. So if you have a look at that sentence, how could we replace that, don't you want to come, with something that removes the not? Any ideas? It's very simple. And this is one of the things that we're finding, let's say, complex to get back to simplicity. Because do you agree how do you answer that? We know that someone would say, yes, I want to come, or no. Really, the sentence is unintelligible. Suze, I saw you had your hand up. Did you have something simpler instead of saying, don't you want to come?
I was just going to say, would you like to come?
Yes. Yeah. Or do you want to come? Or do you choose to come? Yeah. Much simpler. And again, there's nothing I'm pointing out here that there is a right or wrong way to speak. All of this is about being aware of what we speak, because quite often we have two things that we do a lot of. One of them is scripted conversations. So they're the conversations that we have where there's kind of this expected back and forth banter. For instance, hi, how are you? Good, thanks. How are you? Nice weather, isn't it? Yeah, it is good. What do you do for a living? Are you married? Yeah. Okay, so there's this scripted conversation that if someone answers outside that script, because it's almost when you meet somebody, this is kind of the script that we call politeness, the way that it goes, that we fall into it automatically, having no awareness, consciousness of what we're saying, because it's scripted. It's just something socially we've agreed on is the way to interact with people. And the other little phrase that I use, and Susie, you'll be aware of this one, is I call it social lube. So it's all of that stuff that you speak before you get to the main point. And anyone who's worked with me for any length of time will know that I invite everyone, if they call me, jump straight into the reason why you've called. Because that, hi, Donna, how are you? Good, thanks. How are you? Did you have a nice weekend? All of that is lubrication or lube to get to the purpose of the call. And often what you find is that you may be uncomfortable with this social lube where you've got a scripted conversation, and equally the other person is, they are looking to get through it to get to the main point too. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the great negator is what I've called the not. So if you're taking some notes here, is when you're listening and when you're speaking over the next little while, is just do a little count of how many nots are in your language, how often you're negating yourself. And not is a negation, and it's also moving away from what we choose. For instance, what would you like for dinner? I don't want pizza. That's saying what I'm moving away from. I'm choosing to avoid pizza, and still there's no answer to the what would I like for dinner. Does that make sense? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the great negator, the not? No? All righty, let's move to the next one. The big but. So also a common one. So but is often used as a joiner between two statements. So when it is, at best, it diminishes what came first, placing the importance on what came second. Okay, so the example I've given, and you'll have many as well, is thank you for picking me up, but I wish you'd come earlier. What the person actually hears is the admonishment of the last part as more important or superseding the bit that came first. So this one's a really easy one to rectify, because most of the times the things that we say, we can just replace the but with an and. Thank you for picking me up, and I wish you'd come earlier. Thank you for getting the report in, and can we talk about it in the morning? Or and there's a few things I'd like to talk to you about, rather than but there's a few things I'd like to talk to you about. And again, listen for this one. So the third one, I've got 4, and there are many more than this that we cover in the Certificate 3 in personal empowerment. So this is a snapshot of the ones that I think are key with conscious communication. There is far more on some other words that speak to us about more than just the word itself, and some other language patterns that we look at in the personal empowerment. So, for example, the language pattern of being vague. Okay. And 2 of these, the might and maybe in our minimizers, are also language patterns of people who are speaking vaguely. So our minimizers, only, just, might and maybe, are the 4 biggest ones. They diminish and minimalize. They often reflect things like apprehension, so, being uncertain, or resistance to commitment, which is why politicians often use minimizers, and they use vague language, because keeping it vague means that there's nothing definitive that they are committed to. The other thing is that our minimizers do is that they can be derogatory towards yourself and others. So, for example, saying, I'm only the administration assistant, speaks to someone's thought about their value and their job in the workplace. So for you, listening to other people, or listening to yourself, is when you say, I'm only the whatever, hang on, what do I mean by I'm only? Like that's something small. And when I use it for someone else, she's only the, or he's only the whatever, I'm actually being quite derogatory about somebody's role in whatever it is, whether that's personal or whether that's at work. She's just going to the shop first. Right now, I've heard plenty of people say she's just going to the shop like it's only going to be a quick thing, minimizing the time, just a quick dash. And the just actually means she's just going to the shop first. It's going to take her 2 hours to get back. I might be able to make it, again, vague and minimizing. And maybe that's the best option, vague. You know, it shows no commitment to what I actually think and what I actually feel. Does anyone have any questions about those? No? I'm just going to keep buzzing along. If you do have any questions, then please just, put your hand up physically or put your hand up. Yours is on, Karen. Your little hand thing is still on. Pop it up. We're going to have a little chat and an activity in a minute anyway.
That was just for the book. Can you please order a copy for me? That's all.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, the last one. I've called them the slave masters. These are ones for me, my language pattern. I have a lot of these that require me continuous focus and observation. So these are all the words that imply judgment, obligation, pressure, guilt, and powerlessness. We use them also to self-limit our options, and we assert our opinions, sometimes using these in an attempt to control others. Now, I must, I have to, I should. Limitations. So the minute your nervous system hears you say, I should, there is a guilt associated with if you fail to follow through on that. It's a very parental term, actually. You should do this. You should get good grades. You should eat your broccoli, whatever. Must and have to are the same. And the example that I've put in there is to consider, and I'd like us to do this kind of together to feel our words, because conscious communication really is about feeling our words also. So if I say, I have to cook dinner, there's a sense of obligation and pressure for me when I have to cook dinner. I can reduce that pressure and be honest, because sometimes the things we say we have to do, we're tricking ourselves. Because if I say the words, I choose to cook dinner, I then have a more expansive, I'm doing this as a priority or as a choice rather than something I have to do. Does that make sense? So in the chat, drop something in there that you would commonly say that you have to do. I have to get the kids to school on time. Okay, I have to get this report in. I have to be more patient with my kids, whatever it might be. There will be a have to. We've got something in the chat there. I'm looking for the chat. Can I even see it? We all put something in. Now, practice yourself changing that I have to, I should, or I must with I choose. Because the reality is, as an adult and a parent, I'm going to use just out of default the words I have to cook dinner. There is other options though. And it's more truthful for me to say I choose to cook dinner, because my other options are I could ask my partner to cook, I could go buy a pizza, I could start an immediate water fast, I could have leftovers and toast from the fridge. There are a multitude of other options that I could choose The fact that I'm choosing to cook dinner is the best of those options. And it's more open and more empowering for me to say I choose to do something rather than I have to. I have to is only one option. I choose to, when I acknowledge it, says to my nervous system and says to my subconscious that I have options. And generally speaking, we do. That actually is a truthful statement for the most part. So a couple of things you could get better and better at with this is we could say, I choose, right? So I choose to go to the dentist because the other options of avoiding the dentist might mean that a filling requires more work, whatever. I can say I choose. I will is a particularly strong statement. It almost has the strength of I am. The I will is a statement saying I'm calling on myself. And one of the things that you'll notice if you've worked with me is often in emails, I will use the words, will you upload this for me? I'll use will you. And I intentionally do that because the normal, or let's say the automatic way that we've been programmed is say, can you upload this? And when I use the word can you, it's kind of implication is I'm questioning your ability to do so. When I say, will you, I'm calling on your will with the assumption that you can. It's whether you choose to, using your will. So for those of you who get emails from me, understand, will you is sometimes people that are less aware of this might see that as quite strong. Will you do this? My purpose is that I'm calling on the will of which we all have. And if you get really good at these affirmations and practicing it, you could get to the point where you're saying, I get to cook dinner. I get to go to the dentist. Okay. Does that kind of make sense? Because to me, that's a really big language awareness for myself that says where I'm at. So when I find myself using, I'm not going to do this and she shouldn't do that and I have to go to wherever, when I hear my language sounding like that, I know that I'm feeling quite self-restricted, and it gives me a little bit of a, let's say, a red alert saying, hang on, Donna, catch your words reflecting your state of being. And often what I'll do is sit and go, okay, so what's going on here that I'm moving away from things by the word not, making things vague, and contracting myself as if I only have one option when I have many. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to, we'll just stop sharing that. We're going to do the breakfast table scenario in a moment, and I'll grab that and we're going to read through this. So if each of you will open up your speaker, we're going to have a little, we can each play a role here. I'll share it with you. This is a common thing that goes on with families. So can you all see the little breakfast table scenario?
Yep.
Donna,
Yeah.
I'm actually on my phone and it's very hard to see. So can I just listen rather than read?
Yes, certainly. So
Thank you.
let's play a game here. So Susie, can you be mum? Will you be mum? See, I caught myself then. Can you? Of course she can. Will she? So I'm calling her Will. Jenny, will you be Emily?
Yes, I will.
Karen, will you be Jake?
Yes, I will.
And who else have we got on board here? I've only got a limited view of who's here.
I need a dad.
Who's going to be dad? All right. I'll be dad. Arlene.
I'll be dad.
Excellent, Arlene.
I'll
Okay.
be dad.
So I think this is deepen that voice. I think this is a pretty common kind of scenario in the morning. So the family's in the kitchen, they're rushing through their morning routine, so you can get the vibe of where everyone's at here. Mum's pouring coffee, dad and checking her planner, dad's scrolling through his phone. Emily, 15, slumped over a toast. Jake, 10, is playing with his cereal instead of eating it. So, Mum, and you can put as much acting, we can get a Golden Globe award from this too.
We're not going to make it if you two don't get a move on.
Oh, I'm not even hungry and I'm not in the mood for school today.
I don't want this. It's gross.
Jake, don't muck around. You have to eat something. We have to leave soon.
Oh, I have to present my project today and I don't want to mess it up.
And I've got to do PE today. I hate it.
Jake, you should eat something healthier.
Emily, your project looks great, but I think you should have spent a little more time on the last part.
I thought it was fine. I like it, but I guess it could be better.
I do.
Jake, you're only playing for a few minutes and then you have to get dressed. We don't have time for distractions.
I might get ready soon, or maybe later.
I should go to the library after school, but I don't really feel like it.
I should have woken up earlier. Now we're all rushing. I might not be able to pick you up, Emily, depending on work.
I'm only going to be a few minutes late for work. No big deal.
Can you feel a vibe? Because all of you got straight into playing the rules, including the kind of thoughts and attitude and vibe that went behind that. Would you agree?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of things is awareness here. This is common, this kind of way of interacting. So when I talk about conscious communication, all we're talking about is awareness. There's no need for us to beat ourselves up over, oh, I said don't, or, I use the word but. And no need to catch ourselves. What there is a benefit from is listening to these and reading them and seeing, is there a more aware way I can say it that is a moving forward positive thing rather than a contracting, limiting, negating, vague thing? So a couple of questions in here. What patterns of language did you notice? Okay, so we've got the nots, buts, shoulds, have to, only, just, might, maybes. We've got our big 4 variations in there. How could we change the statements, rewording them into that positive, productive conversation? So let's have a look. If we go back and you have a look at the part you played, Mum, how could we reword that to be a moving forward thing rather than a what's not going to happen? Who's going to jump? Who was Mum again? Was that Susie? Was that you?
What about just we're going to make it on time if we all get a move on?
Yes. Yeah.
Leave the knots out altogether.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yes, we'll make it on time if we all get a wriggle on or whatever. And it's a little bit like that, you tell a child, don't drop that, do not drop that. It's planted the dropping thing already, the negative into their heads, where you could say, take care, hold that with both hands, or be careful carrying that. That's moving the don'ts out. So, Emily, any way you could change the response there?
I can't just drop the knots, unfortunately, in that one. So I'm just trying to work out how better to say it.
And you can break it into 2.
Yeah.
I'm full.
Mm.
I'll eat something later,
I'll eat something later. Yeah.
and perhaps something like, I would rather be doing my dance lessons today than
Yeah.
school.
They're changing the whole thing. So not saying not, but just,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Suppose that's probably the same for Jake. Instead of saying I don't want this, maybe it's this tastes a bit funny. I might grab something later.
Or can I have toast instead?
Yeah.
You know.
Yep.
Yeah. And so without going through all of those, because you can see the vibe that it had with so many negatives in there and so many of those words, you know, and I've only picked 4 out of kind of conscious communication. You can see the vibe that it gives when we're always into negatives.
Yeah.
So I'll stop sharing that for a minute, just so that we can have a little quick conversation of, as I was going through those 4 things, and so we had the knots, the buts, others,
Minimizers and slave
Minimizers.
masters.
minimizers and slave masters. So which of those do you think is used most often by you?
I'm a mum. Mine's don't not.
Yeah.
Mine's very much that great negative. I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
Trying to
So
get kids out the door.
Great. So that awareness of that is when you catch yourself not is it's the don't drop that. Well, there's no reason for me to plant that. What do we choose to do instead?
Yeah.
So, yep, excellent. That's one of mine too, Karen. I particularly when I'm frazzled. When I'm frazzled or a little bit activated is when I drop into automatic language, and that language has been taught to us for a long time. That's how generally the world communicates, really quite unconsciously.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
My
Jenny.
biggest, I was going to say, my biggest one is the but. Absolutely. But when you talk about, how we're taught, I think back to when I was learning joining words. They tell us to put but in there as a
Yeah.
joining word. So to suddenly try and remove it, can definitely see how it can work. But yeah, it has turned us into quite a negative, hasn't it?
I absolutely agree. I remember in English learning,
Yeah.
the joining words, whatever
Mm,
the English term for that is
mm,
the but was a large one, and it has one we've taken where that but then becomes you may as well have left that whole first part of the statement out, because the person is hearing what comes after it, which is generally the negative.
mm,
Yeah.
And again, we've been taught that way. So we are intelligent human beings who have our own will. So now it's just, okay, I was taught that way, and I can see that maybe that is less than productive for me. How about I just play with my words and catch myself using those buts and those nots? No need to beat yourself up. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. Oh, there's another one. Then have a little bit of a giggle at yourself for being such a little programmed walking AI. Susie, which one's yours, do you think?
Yeah, I'm thinking don't, but I'm going to start listening to myself a little bit more over the next few days. But the other one that I really relate to is changing my language to I choose to instead of I have to. Like, I realize that really weighs down on me, feeling that I've got to do a whole lot of things when I might not have to really. So that resonates with me, that one as well.
Yeah. That option, moving from I have to or I must or any variation of that, is extremely powerful to give yourself, I have a choice. Tell your subconscious, tell your conscious, I have a choice. That may be the best choice to cook dinner. There are other choices though, and there are other choices. And see how I just caught myself then, because I could easily have said that may be the best choice, but there are others. That would have been a fairly automatic response.
Yeah.
And the same thing is that may be a choice, and there are others is kind of just I'm just tweaking the nuances of my language and being hyper aware of what I'm saying to others as well as what I'm saying to my subconscious, because remember, this is starting to become tangible, our thoughts, our words, our actions.
And even doing that role play, I felt how my body changed, even acting it, and feeling how much stress it was putting on my body.
Yeah. And that's a good thing to do, is practice the words, the difference between that, because we're very prone to ignore what we feel with our words. And you've just said quite sensitively, Susie, that you feel a contraction with the word I have to. We tend to ignore our body's little contractions like that until it's something really big, like we feel sick or sore or whatever. So listening to the words and the impact that they have, we know that if someone says you have to, and they say it to us, automatically there's a contraction. And yet we're doing it to ourselves a lot of the time. Arlene, which one's your fave?
Yeah, the most challenging over all these years has been the knots. And I hear them, I feel them. And sometimes, as Jenny had just shown, sometimes they're really hard to flip. And so it is quite a game, and I have enjoyed it, the little hilarity. Most of it's in my head because I'm quite good at doing autocorrect and working on it, noticing it in my head without anyone else knowing. And it has been just a lot of fun, and yeah, a big change when you do make the correction.
Yeah, in the way that you feel, yes. And Arlene, you've treated it as a little bit of a game with yourself, which is what I encourage as well, because you can catch yourself on, I was full of knots and butts today, right? Because I was agitated, and that's okay. You're catching it, and you're catching your state of being. And what we're looking at doing is being more expansive and more open and more willing to move forward with ourselves and our language, rather than I'm not going to do that and I can't do that.
And what's really good is to have a reciprocating person who can give you a little bit of space to sort out your words before you put them out. Because there's usually those times when I'm hurrying and I'm trying to get it out fast that they just go bleh. Whereas when you're with somebody who is allowing that space, it's so much better and you're more at ease. And as you said before, when you're rushing, they just get a bit messier.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Arlene. Kathy?
Thank you.
Minimizes, I think. Yeah, minimizes.
She were just going to drop one in then, weren't you? She was going to say minimizes, I think.
Yep.
Just to give a bit of ambiguity around there. You caught yourself. Great.
I did. I caught myself saying things like, oh, I'm only working 3 days a week, or I'm just doing teacher learning support, or I'm just living in a small unit, and I have been doing that. But I did catch, well, it wasn't myself yesterday, but so I'm giving this more importance. My husband said to me, have you told them that you can't work another day? And I said, well, I can work another day, but you mean, have I told them that I'm choosing to work 3 days? So yeah, it does start to become more obvious, but I think I have to be careful when I'm picking it up in other people, how I go about it.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think I was a little bit of an evangelist when I first came across the conscious language stuff. And I think it's wise to observe what other people say and concentrate on your own language first. Certainly, if you're in a teaching type position, you can introduce this. Can you say that a different way without using the not? What are you moving towards rather than what are you moving away from? That kind of thing. Yes, catching yourself and your own language is the first game. Some people are averse to having their language picked up. But tell your partner. I mean, you've obviously, could have told your partner what it is you're doing with conscious communication, and then they kind of, okay, well, she's kind of learning something and got a little bit of a game going.
Yeah, I certainly have, and it's not the first time, but I think there was a little bit of defensiveness on his part, and I may have come across a little bit too strong. And I just said, please, when you're referencing me, don't tell me things now that's a negative, to double negative, but can you put it in a not a positive way rather than a negative?
Yeah, what you're choosing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All good fun.
Yeah.
And Fiona, I see a little symbol there with FS there, and your microphone is blocked off. Is there anything that you would like to add in? Which one of those 4 is your game? You're going on and off.
I
with
would
the,
do the can't, and is it work?
Keep your little microphone was going on and off then, Fiona. So I think if speak now and we will. No, it's off again.
Is that work?
Yes. No, it just went off again. Is it? Are you touching something or?
Working now?
Yes.
Sorry about
Yes.
that. Can't is mine. Very strong on can't. I can't do that because, I have something else to do, and I can't do this because I have something else to do. So I find myself doing that a lot.
Yeah. So that's a catch, because, I cannot do that because I have something else to do. There's a couple of language patterns in there. One is that, well, you could, because possibly you could cancel that other thing. So saying you can't is self-restricting, maybe unnecessarily. And the other thing is, I did notice there, when we back anything up with a I can't because, what we're actually doing is justifying our choices when there is no need to justify them. And so it may be, I'll give an example, Fiona, this may be along the lines of what you were saying, was I can't go out to dinner that night because I've organised to take the kids to sport. Okay. The truth of the matter is that perhaps you could change your plans. Someone else could go to sport. It's possible that you could go to dinner and you're choosing to do something else, take your kid to sport. What there is no necessity to do about our choices, and this is part of the empowerment thing, is there's no need for us to explain to someone else what we're choosing. So one of the powerful tools that we can use is saying no thanks with no excuse. There's no need for us to say, no thanks, I can't because whatever. We can simply say, no thanks. Very few people will say, well, why can't you? But we often volunteer our rationale before it's even asked for, actually. Thanks for joining us, Fiona.
Thanks.
We've gone a little bit over time, so I'll finish off with, we've just started our manifesting and conscious communication pair of units in the Certificate 3 in Personal Empowerment. This is kind of a snippet from that where we go into more depth, and we've got rolling intake. So if anyone either in this session or in the getting the recording is interested in either enrolling in the conscious language communication and manifesting units, get in contact really quickly, or expressing interest in the next units, which is life balance and wellness. love to work with people who want to come play and work and learn with us. So with that, thank you everyone for joining in, and I will see if we can find something that I can send you to play with, that you can practice. What I would say in the meanwhile is listen to politicians. They're almost an example of everything that we should avoid in our language. And even in reading, you know, when you read articles in the magazine or reading in books, you'll start to know notice the nots and buts and all of those things, and say, is there another way of putting that opens myself up to more possibilities rather than self-limiting myself? So, thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
And
Donna.
Thanks,
Catch you
Donna.
next
Thank you, Donna.
time. Bye.
Thank you.
bye.